So reminding ourselves, while we're sitting there, you could say that from some past virtue in the past, we've programmed our mind to go in this direction, but we've got to keep reinforcing it with strong intention and strong, pure motivation that kind of keeps going, They say, the way they say is we're propelled by the force of our past actions. That's mental energy drives us in a certain direction. So we're going in this direction. How fantastic from our hard work in the past. We've got to continue it, keep it moving, keep putting the petrol in the tank. So we're going to listen to his teachings, so I can find tools that I can use in my life. All of the whole scenario would be so that I can eventually become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. But maybe you don't want to become a Buddha, maybe you're not a Buddhist, maybe it doesn't make sense to you yet, maybe you think, okay, at least to become a better human being, at least to help others, at least to understand my delusions, stop harming others and be more useful. Already amazing. Thinking like this. So okay, what we've been doing these days, in kind of a random way, is we take this whole package called the Lam Rim, path gradual, this nice medieval phrase that Tsongkhapa coined, that we would call in our contemporary world a course, quite literally that. It's a course. So obviously the contents of a course, whether it's music or cooking, are presented in a nice orderly way, orderly in terms of experiential capability of internalizing. All courses are like that, and this is what we're geniuses at. And we call it education. So what you're doing here, this Lam Rim, what we've been talking about is all of the contents of Buddha's view, Buddha's views about how things exist. That's what Buddhism is actually. It's a view, a world view of how things exist. And then Buddha focuses on what causes happiness and suffering. It's experientially based, or there's some interesting philosophical ideas you can fill your head with. It's got to be experiential. As Lama Tsongkhapa says, it's one of his little Lam Rim texts called Songs of Experience. All the teachings, all the contents of the course are to be taken as sound advice. Because there's no contradiction between that advice, or as it says, scripture, the advice, and practice. So if you had a recipe book, every word in that recipe book has to lead you to making cakes and food, doesn't it? It can't just be interesting philosophical concepts. It has to be practical. It has to be able to be done. And this is a crucial thing. And our trouble is in our culture, because we're very intelligent, super educated, super educated, we can get really caught up into intellectual forgetting about how to practice. And then we think because we know the words, we think we know what we know it experientially. But we know there's a clear distinction. You can know lots of recipes really well, and that's great. But if you fool yourself into thinking you're a cook, and you really can't make a cake, you're in big trouble. At the same time, you can't possibly make a decent cake until you've got the recipe. So there's this perfect relationship between theory and practice. But often with spiritual practice we get confused and we think, oh, theories are just theories. I don't want philosophy, I want practice, please. And we assume that means sitting down with your legs crossed and your eyes closed, or, eyes crossed, legs closed, whatever it is. We assume, we see the visual, we visualize a person's body and think, wow, look at that, that's meditation, that's practice. Well, that's extremely simplistic, really naive and even incorrect. Practice is working on the mind. If you're sitting there doing the dishes, feeling angry because your hubby's not doing the dishes, and you change your mind right there, you just did practice. That's practice. You'd be sitting down meditating with nice music on, feeling very pleasant, thinking you're practicing. It's a load of rubbish, you're not. What Dharma practice is if you change your mind, basically. That's the bottom line. Okay, so we've been presenting, as I said, randomly. So let's look at it all. We were doing the Bodhisattva class last time. We'll go back to the beginning and I'll try and keep on track and present each of the components of this path and how one leads to the next. And we've basically touched on all of them briefly. So we'll use as our basis, of course, this Lam Rim package. I'll just speak about it in a very simple way. kind of tasty, experiential, try and keep it tasty, based upon Tsongkhapa's teaching, which is based upon this text that this Indian master scholar Yogi wrote in the 11th century when he was invited to Tibet, Atisha. Little text. All these texts are written as nice poetry, so they can be very deceptive. They sound kind of cute and sweet because they're nice and poetic. This text, I think, called something like "Lamp on the Path," lamp, the light that guides you on your way. And what Atisha did was basically take all these points of Buddhist teachings, metaphysics, philosophy, psychology, meditation, and present them in this orderly, experiential structure. So what you do with the contents of the course is very simple, isn't it? You learn the words first, you learn the theories, and then you practice. So with cooking, music, maths, exactly the same. No difference here, which is very surprising to us. No difference here. If you're being a Buddhist, you're internalizing Buddha's views. If you're being a musician, you're internalizing Bach's views, or whatever. So starting, Atisha, like we mentioned a couple of days ago, Atisha, presents this preliminary contemplation to be done. He kind of cobbled together a bunch of, from Buddhist teachings, and cobbled together this little contemplation, which he calls thinking about meditating on this precious human rebirth. And everything's done, sort of like bullet points, which is pretty helpful. Bullet points. So he's got like 18 bullet points. In general, all he's saying is, listen, look at the advantages you've got and look at the disadvantages you avoid getting. Which is a practical way to say we're one of the 1% on this earth. Not the money 1%, but the good fortune 1%. And what does that mean? Why are we fortunate? Because we certainly don't think we're fortunate. We just kind of because we've got this very vivid sense of self-existent me, kind of this, and the feeling we have, even if no one told us this, but that's our philosophy, we have been told it, and we just reinforce it, is that either God made us or Mummy and Daddy made us, or a bit of both, So we assume in both cases that I'm this product. I'm the handiwork of someone else. The more you think of the Buddhist view of karma, the more this is such a wacky idea, I tell you. Very schizophrenic, very weird, very dualistic, very set up for suffering. We're this victim who got plonked on this earth, and that's how we feel instinctively, isn't it? This miniature sense of self. Our sense of self is about a pinhead big. We can't see past our own nose. We're overwhelmed by our own feelings and thoughts every microsecond. The subject, as I said, of all the roommates in our head is I. It's just the way sentient beings are. This is, of course, we think it's normal, but Buddha would say it's deep, terrible mental illness. It's it, really. And we just think it's normal. It's so tragic. So, of course, it takes time to see this. So because we just sort of plod along and always, addicted to our negativities, this is the irony of ego, we always think what we haven't got, which is the function, of course, of attachment. And the more attachment we have, the more miserable and lonely and bereft and empty we feel. So even if we've got mega rich, even if we're totally beautiful, look at the feeling of loss and hopeless. Look at, you think of examples like Marilyn Monroe. For me, she's like this classic, living example of this terrible suffering and dissatisfaction, this utter self-pity and misery. Look at her. Unbelievable. Adored by millions. People couldn't keep their eyes off her. Look at the terrible mental suffering. Self-loathing. This is ego. This is the function of ego. So because we have this, we don't think we're fortunate. We don't know this. So we've got to do some this kind of real clear, analytical thinking to try and convince ego of the lies. And this takes time for us. It just takes time because these delusions are so entrenched. This misconception of pathetic me is so entrenched. So it's not like magic overnight. Oh yeah, I'm really fortunate after all. Wow. No, it takes a long time to actually buy into that. So the points that Atisha makes, like I said, 18 different points, just in general, what he's saying is, like we mentioned already, but the very fact that we have a reasonably working body is miraculous. The fact that we have a reasonable mind, that we have access to goodness and kindness and intelligence, and most miraculously access to the wish to become a better person, And why we have all this is because we're relatively free on earth. We're relatively not sick, not going crazy, not living in a war zone, not being abused and slaughtered every day, not having total, serious, completely delusional mental illness every day. This is why we can access these parts of ourselves. Miraculous. And we have enough money in the bank, or even not in the bank, but coming in every week to keep us going so that we can do something like this. We don't have to slog 15 hours a day to get a bowl of rice. So we truly are phenomenally fortunate. But the thing is, we tend to think, because we think we're victims of this handiwork of someone else plonked on the earth, we think it's either good luck or bad luck. So we're prepared to think we've got good luck. Aren't I lucky, we'll say. We'll even say the universe is kind to us. It's just dualistic nonsense. Who's been kind is whoever the continuity of your mind. Then it was labelled Mary or Fred or Tenzin. Not more than a few weeks, probably, before conception, the present mother's womb. Immense hard work at morality, at generosity. You didn't have the accumulation of generosity karmic imprints in the mind. We wouldn't even have 1 grain of rice. So the fact that we can access things easily, the fact that we can get a job, the fact that we can get credit, it's like miraculous. It's the result of generosity and of not stealing. The fact that we have a human body is morality, a phenomenal amount of morality. And the fact that we have the other conditions is all a result of all these different, why we have access to spiritual paths is because we've done it before. We've programmed ourselves. We made aspirations and prayers in the past, and we practiced, so we've bumped into it again. Just like the fisherman fishes because he bumps into it again because he's done it before. So we set ourselves up. We set it up. You see it this way, there's a sense of amazing. But appreciation, like you just don't feel lucky if you have money in the bank. When you look at that number, you know the hard work that you've done to produce it. So you appreciate it. Not just, oh, aren't I lucky? You appreciate it because you remember the hard work. That's the attitude to have towards this human life. These conditions called our life, called the precious human rebirth, whatever you want to call it. And that takes time to think. And so what comes from this? What comes from appreciating? You don't just sit on your laurels and go, aren't I lucky? And then, look at your money and then close, and log out of the bank. This is a really simple attitude, this one. When you look at money, just a number, you know it's a resource. You know it's just not something, how interesting you, or if you've got notes, you've got a big box of money under your bed. Every now and again, which you would be if you're miserly, you'd open it up and you'd put all these pretty numbers and pretty pictures, totally boring, really. And you think, oh, aren't I lucky? Then you put it under the bed again. That's kind of dumb, isn't it? You know that money's a resource. It's a really simple logic. Money's a resource. In itself, it's nothing. Bits of paper, plastic, in fact. Pretty useless. The art's not even that nice. You can't frame it. It's too small to wipe your bottom with. You can't wipe your bottom with plastic. Australian money, you can't wipe your bum. So it's like nothing. In itself, it's nothing. In itself, it really is nothing. Wouldn't you agree? It's nothing. And this is proving emptiness as well. But we know what it represents. We know it's a resource. That's why we get excited. Even we see one little purple note on the ground with a 5 in the corner. We get excited. So, that's the point here. You just don't take yourself for granted, which we do. You've got to wake up and realise we're like this. We have this amazing, we are ourselves, this body, this life, this mind, this combination is a resource. The money is the fruit of hard work. This body and life is the fruit of hard work. So if the money is from hard work and then you know you can get things with it, then you see it's a resource. So what can you get with this resource here? This is the point. You don't waste it. Wasting it means just, wasting money means just, using it for toilet paper. Wasting is life. Quite literally, very simple, means following delusions. And it's logical, the logic of karma. So if virtue and hard work and morality and generosity produces this life, and if lying and stealing and killing and being depressed and miserable and not fair, poor me, produces a suffering life, and if you know you want a decent life and not a suffering one, then it follows logically you've got to keep doing the same thing. It's just not complicated. We make it all mystical. It's practical. It's like practical. So it's logical. We have to think about it, of course. Think about it. And take this as our working hypothesis. Clearly this is not the materialist view. This is the Buddhist view. So if we're taking that on board, then to appreciate this precious human rebirth, the first step is that. And then to think, okay, I don't want to waste it. I don't want to waste it. So then you enter junior school, grade 1. And then Buddha gets it. So what's happened here is Atisha's got this agenda. His agenda is to give us wake-up calls by thinking about this. So he leads us step by step in this little course, which is in mental inclination. So the next step is, he then gets it to think about impermanence in junior school, grade 1, which is very extensive from Buddha's teachings. But Buddha's teachings are extensive about impermanence. He talks about gross impermanence. He in particular talks about subtle impermanence, the real meaning of impermanence, which can't be cognized by the gross mind. It has to be cognized in meditation. And indeed is the object of meditation for the most Theravada practitioners, subtle impermanence. And it's very helpful to get into this. It's just the junior school, grade 1. But Atisha doesn't go on about subtle impermanence very much because it can sound very interesting. But he wants to get a wake-up call. He wants to increase this wake-up call to not waste his life. And so he gets us right between the eyeballs. And he gets us to think about gross impermanence, but not of cups and relationships and flowers, but of me. Death, in other words. Right there. Like really boom. Wake up. So then as we talk, whatever day it was, Atisha describes it in bullet points, 3 bullet points. First, you're going to die, babe. Death is death. Death is death. This book I'm reading, I mentioned Undead, this scientific writer, because he's written a lot about this and investigating death, and he talks exactly like a Buddhist about the definiteness of death. You don't know when you're going to die. He really has thought about it. You can see he's not a Buddhist at all. And everybody calls him depressing, Everybody says he should go to a therapist because he always talks about death and thinks about death. Because he talks about it so openly and so directly, but clearly he's not depressed. He cracks jokes. You can say he's got to some extent a realization of impermanence. He's thought about it immensely. For him, it's not a fearful, horrible thing now, but he's really considered mentally ill because when he had to fill out some insurance form, how often do you think about death? He said, because he was writing this book, he said, 70 times a day. And they were seriously saying he's got to go to an immediate, go to a psychiatrist, Because we just so live in denial of it. Why? Okay, we have to put why. Because we have in this mind, as Buddha would put it, this massive lie, this massive misconception, this delusion that's so primordial, deeply instinctive. And they call it grasping at permanent me. It's a grosser mistake than grasping at inherent me, but it's an excellent stepping stone. Because of this instinctive grasping at permanent me, we then know intellectually that we will die. Nobody thinks they want to die. But look how we live in utter denial and are horrified to say it, don't want to think about it, don't want to say it, think it's depressing to say you'll die. It's like, it feels like a mistake. I mean, it's beyond bizarre when it is a fact. And of course we have all this fear because we have this confusion about what will happen after death, all these different views, And mainly because we grasp at this permanent me, and we grasp at permanent me, of course, because of the root delusion, grasping at inherent me, which is the root mistake. But here, grade 1 junior school, Atisha wants us to think about death. So what we get from this is we get some realization of impermanence in general, which is a necessary stepping stone in our progress, because it's reality. But he's got this agenda. It's a wake-up call. Because you increase your wish. This precious life, wow, I worked so hard to get it. Oh my God, it could die, I'll die at any moment. So you increase your wish not to waste this life. It energizes you not to waste this life. Because you know, the second bullet point, I don't know when I'll die. And the way you think about these, they say meditate on them. Again, we get confused about meditation. But remember, what it just means is think about it. But you think about it not in a vague way. This is a really important point as well. I swear to you, this is so important. When we get this, we'll really be on track. Think about impermanence. We don't know what it means. But think about maths. We know it means something. But you get a particular thing that says 1 + 1 = 2. You know you've got to think certain thoughts. And the point of thinking about it is to come to a conclusion. In other words, it's coherent thinking. But we mostly have random, strained, all over the place, up and down, like a yo-yo thinking. We don't ever come to conclusions. Most of the thinking we do is around in circles, fear-based, anxious-based. So if we think about death, we don't know what it means. What do you mean think about death? I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. We don't know what it means because we don't have the equation. So all Buddha's giving us is his approach, and this is the way the Tibetans put it. These bullet points you use as the basis, as the outline for your thinking. You're just being helpful. You've got to go to the maths class first to hear what you're supposed to think. And then as you learn it more and more, you can extrapolate and do your own thinking because you've got the theories down. Same here. So Atisha makes it easy for you, gives you the bullet points. Think first that you will die. So like I mentioned a few days ago, how you put this into daily life is instead of the way we do now, where we see ants die, we think of 350, people in Tanzania dying. We think of, people out there who don't touch your life, the strangers, which is, all these people out there dying every day. Like just today, notice on my iPad the news, massive, what do you call it? Cyclone? Tornado. Okay, you're all reading your iPads, aren't you? Okay. You're all reading your iPhones. You're supposed to be in strict retreat. What? 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 Anyway, I forget. I know. No iPad, but you should have your iPhone as well. We should never mind what to do. Never mind. It's okay. It's food for thought. It's all good use for the meal. But these things, every single day you read another one. So what happens is, isn't it, again, that's stranger, friend, enemy thing. That's different. But no, it is valid here. When you read it, the suburb called Moore, wasn't it? Moore? In Oklahoma. Now, so when I read it, I had to force myself to think about it because they're not my people. If I'd known it was Carlton in Melbourne where my sister lived and I know so intimately since I was a child, then it would have been so shocking. I would have read every story, wouldn't I? It would have moved me deeply. And this is getting closer to home, isn't it? Because it's mine, my people. And this is how we have to treat it. So the thing is, the learning here, with just this first bullet point, death is definite. What happens is because it's strangers, we gloss over it. It doesn't touch us. Because the instinct of grasping at permanent me can't bear the thought of it. When it gets closer to home, when it's friends who die or family, then we notice it. But still we don't get the right point. It moves us. We're full of grief and tragedy. But we still don't get the learning. And the learning is, that'll be me. That's the one thing that it means when we think of death as definite. It means that will be me. And you won't think it unless you see death. If you see life all around you, you're confident of believing you're a living person, as Vajrasattva puts it. But as soon as you read about death, it's a marvellous opportunity to grab it and get the learning from it. So it's like that's the learning from. What's the learning from 1 + 1? The learning is that it's 2. It's practical. What's the learning here? How do you apply this bullet point? Death is definite. Oh yeah, I know death's definite. So what? We will say. We haven't got the learning from it. The learning is so simple. That'll be me. Right there, the wake-up call. It hits you. And this is the point. That's what it means. It's right there. You don't have to think about it in your head. Just read the papers. Read your iPad. Read your iPhone. Look around you. See the ants, the mice. Everywhere you go. Everywhere you go. It's so insanely, blindly evident. Because of this is the thing. Like to the mother who doesn't have an attachment to killing, the suffering of the fish is blazingly evident. She sees their flapping bodies. But the boy with attachment can't see it. So we can see how we can be blind. Delusions blind us from truth, is what Buddha is saying. So this delusion of grasping at permanent me, living in primordial fear of death, grasping at me, then we're blind. When we see it, we see the death, but we don't get the point. And this is the instant, it's all you got to do is say, that'll be me. You're stopping your tracks. Right there. No agonizing. It's so simple. That'll be me. And of course it will be. When your grandma dies, when it gets really close, when your beloveds die, that's when it's really tasty. We still don't realise it'll be me. There's a sense of relief. I'm not that. When someone goes sent to prison, someone gets caught, I didn't get caught. You feel like relieved you didn't get caught, even though you did it too. That's how we feel. As Vajrasattva says, we divide the whole world into living people and dying people. And we're in the living group. There's like a sense of kind of superiority, almost like an arrogance. I'm a living person. Oh, they're dying people, or dead ones, one or the other. It's so bizarre, Concepts. Talk about making things up. I'm a dying person, Vajrasattva says. We're all dying. It's just a question of time. It's a fact. It's not religion, it's fact. So recognizing it. What's the point from this? Even from this one. What's the point from the first bullet point of the 3 about death? Junior school, grade 1. Death is definite. That'll be me. What's the conclusion? Because I remembered my life is precious, I better not waste my life. So right there you get the wake-up call. It'll be me. Oh, what does that mean? I better not waste this precious life. This is the way you internalise this stuff. The second bullet point is, and it's getting closer to home, is the time of death's uncertain. That, like I said when we talked about it before, that should really freak us out. Because it's literally accurate. It's true. Nobody knows when they'll die, unless you've got a plan to kill yourself in 10 minutes. It's a fact. We have to think about it, but the mind resists mightily. And then you think of those people in Oklahoma. They went to bed, you know. As Lama Zopa says, they woke up in another realm. Big shock. They didn't expect, unless they were given warning, I don't know. But this is how most people die, by surprise. Don't expect it. Suddenly you're alive, you're a living person, then you're a dead person. You know? So the time of death is uncertain. This is really, we need lots of logical arguments like we talked, you know, to really convince ourselves of this one, to get ourselves a wake-up call. This should energize us, galvanize us into action. Conclusion, I absolutely did not waste my life. This just takes so much time. I'm saying these words. I've been hearing these words for half my life as a Buddhist. And I tell you, I haven't yet realized. More than I did. But when I really think of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and the holy beings who really have these realizations. Because he never sleeps. As Roger, his attendant, says, for Rinpoche, sleep is a disgusting waste of time. That proves he's got the realization of impermanence. Not a single time to waste. I mean, it's exhausting to even think that. It's bizarre. There's no concept like this in our world. You know? Because he's not wasting 1 second of his life. Okay, way to go. It takes time because we're so thick in these delusions, even in relation to something so evident, like impermanence. Emptiness, more difficult. This is evident. No problem. This is so simple. You know, but look how deluded our minds are. Living in denial. The truth. And this is why we suffer physically. So the third point, of course, is the conclusion. If it's true, I will die. And if it's true that I'll die at any moment, then at the time of death, so practical, you know, so practical. What's useful to me? What's useful to me? Well, of course, we're taking Buddha's views here, given that I've got a continuity of mental moments that goes back and back and back, which is my mind, given that the main law that determines my happiness and my suffering, given that my mind will continue, and then given that every microsecond of what I think and do and say, which is, quotes, a karma, will leave seeds in the mind, and given that those seeds will ripen in the future as either happiness or suffering, that virtuous ones ripen as happiness and negative ones ripen as suffering, this is what Buddha says is a natural law. Given all this, which is one's hypothesis, then it follows logically, simply logically. The only thing that's of any use to me when I die is the virtuous imprints in my mind. So, you know, you just do a bit of reduction there. So that means I look into myself now, and I see what I think of now is most important. And I look into my mind, and I see myself. I mean, I'm more renounced than I was a few years ago, and I sound like really renounced, like this nun. I don't have family, don't have money. Sounds like so holy. I don't have any. I just have one little bag, one set of robes, you know. I'm an Imelda Marcos of shoes. I've got about 3 pairs of shoes. You know, I have my one iPod with my prayers on it, my iPad, my computer. I look like I'm really renounced. And I am in comparison with how I was. But believe me, the subject of all my thoughts is I. You know, I'm tired, I'm hot, I put the heater on, put the heater off. Gets too hot, gets too cold. I'm tired, I lie down. 6-8 hours every night, I sleep very happily in total ignorance. So I preoccupy myself the whole day, you know. So I do a few nice things, I try to be good to others. I still compare though in comparison with the higher beings who've got the realization, which is where I can head to. I'm still overwhelmed by thinking about me, thinking about my fat and my thin and my old and my this and my that, and what people think and all those things, which are the preoccupations of attachment. It just takes time to get past them. We're so primordial, we're so entrenched. Not being mean about ourselves, just seeing the truth of it. It takes so much time. So then the thing what's going to be helpful to me at the time of death, and because I'm working on this book of Lama Zopa Rinpoche at the moment, of how to help people at the time of death, it's really helpful to me. The only thing that's helpful is the virtue in my mind. So what does that mean? That means I don't wait till I'm dying to get virtuous. It's like saying I've got a car test, I've got a driving test in a month. I'll wait till I get there to drive. I don't think so. You don't talk like that. You've got to prepare, baby. That means you've got to practice morality now, this minute. So simple, so logical. Wake up call. because that's going to be useful. I've got to train my mind in virtue. That means I've got to train my mind mostly, what Rinpoche talks about the whole time, that the worst, the most tragic, worst enemy at the time of death is attachment. First because we lived our lives without ever thinking about impermanence, living in denial of it. It's always out there, someone else dies. Now the horror is confronting us that I am dying. So the fear is so huge for most of us. Then because I'm so primordially attached to my body, my thoughts, my this, my that, and then we've got my husband, my children, my reputation, my something, my money in the bank, my pension plan, the grandkids, the this, the thing, the sentimental things in the drawer. I'm not being horrible, look how we are. Worrying about the cups and the this and the that, and behind the broken ones and the good ones, and how much and the money in the back and the debt. Look at the stuff that we fill our minds with, which we spend our lives thinking about. Spend our lives thinking about. Why? Because there's an assumption that's what life's about. Or, as most people, you read it, it's like a mantra. Most people say, what's life all about? Family and health. Which is marvellous, sounds great. And it's true in the context, like I use that analogy of Buddha nature, I use the analogy of the acorn. It's true if you want to be the best acorn. Healthy acorn and nice friendly acorns all around taking care of you. It's true. But if you're focusing on your Buddha nature, it's not the most important thing at all. It's the worst danger. Because when you're going to be surrounded by people you're so attached to, you're freaking out because you know you're leaving them. Terrifying for most people. Not trying to be dramatic. I'm telling you from what I've heard from so many people, like people who do this, hospice nurse, for example, a friend of mine in California. She said most people die with fear. Never looked at it, never thought about it, and to process this before you die. Some people can do it, but it's rare because it's so horrifying to come to terms with this fact. So why not start getting used to the fact now? It's just preparing yourself. It's like getting ready for your driving test. It's so sensible. So sensible. It's just logical. It's not meant to be religious or punitive or none of this. It's just practical. You understand it when it comes to ordinary things, planning for the future, preparing and all this. We understand it perfectly. We don't think of it when it comes to death. Or the next life, actually. You're really preparing for the next life. That's the Buddhist way of saying it. But here we're just getting the wake-up call. We're thinking, my God, I will die, don't know when, and what's important. Then Atisha's not ready yet to tell us how to practice. He's now getting us to the next step, which is the next wake-up call to increase our wish not to waste this life. It's like incremental. We're not going to practice yet. He's priming our minds. Now this next step for us is so bizarre, But again, it's taking it from the Buddha's view. This leads us to the next step. When I do die, haven't got a clue when, there are all sorts of options of the type of rebirth I could get. And this is where he then gets us to think about the suffering of, as he calls it, the suffering of the lower realms. This is a mind-boggling one for us. And again, it's a practical one. It's practical. If you are addicted to smoking, we know one of the methods is to look at the consequences of smoking. To go to those videos and look at the movies and talk to people who've got cancerous lungs, and like one of those ads they put of the woman with the hole in her throat and like a bass baritone throat because she's got no voice cords there because she's got cancerous throat from smoking. All these things, all these ads, all these great ads on the telly about giving it up and emphysema and all this. What do you think they're for? They're wake-up calls. They are fear. They're supposed to energize us to have fear, to get the wake-up call to realize, do I want that consequence? And of course the conclusion is no, so I'd better give up smoking. And why do we need these kind of fearful wake-up calls? It's because we're addicted to smoking. Well, that's all Buddha's saying, Atisha's saying here. We're all addicted to the status quo, addicted to the sense of self, addicted to permanent need. We can't see the truth, according to Buddha. This is our hypothesis here. So we have to give ourselves some wake-up calls. So he wants us to, Atisha, next step, wants us to think about the suffering of certain types of rebirth that are options for when we die. So, as we know, we discussed this a couple of days ago, just to reiterate Buddha's worldview. There's trillions of sentient beings, we would say. In fact, there's not an atom of space you won't find minds. Everywhere, in the flowers, in our ear, in our gut, under our armpit, in our skin, in the air, everywhere there is existence. Everywhere there are the four elements. It's a conducive environment for the presence of minds there. trillions of minds. There are 7 billion humans. This is like a millionth of percent of all sentient beings. Then you've got animals. So then the Buddha way Buddha divides it. First of all, you've got all the sentient beings. First you've got all minds, and that's divided into superior beings and ordinary beings. And the division of a superior being between the superior and ordinary is from the first moment you've got a direct insight into emptiness. From that moment you become a superior being. And then you've got lots of work to do to get to all the way to become a Buddha. And then all the rest like is called ordinary beings or samsaric beings, which is us, those who have ignorance in the mind and delusion. We're samsaric, we're in samsara, quote unquote. Then you divide them into 3 categories, the way they talk. You've got the formless realm, which are minds of beings who from much concentration, absorption and concentration, don't even have bodies, don't even have psyche, don't even have gross energies at all. Just have deeply immersed in, absorbed in concentration. They're the formless beings. It's kind of useless rebirth. It lasts for a few eons and you come out of this and you're miserable again. So it's a bit of a waste of time. Then you've got some are slightly grosser than that. They're called form beings. Never mind all those. Then you've got the third group, which is the lot we're in. This is called desire realm. There's 6 groupings of us in this desire realm. Desire implying attachment, the product of attachment. And so in that, there's sort of all these different possibilities of types of rebirth. A rebirth is just, as we were discussing, is just a type of mind coming along with a type of physicality and a type of environmental experience. You know? So you've got the top end, the top suburbs of the desire realm is called the God realm. This is very equivalent, you could say, to the Muslims' paradise, Christians' heaven. Which I think points to common experiences of many types of people throughout the world. But interpreted differently. Because some people would say that's what God made and you get sent there by God. Buddha would say it's an experience, it's a psychological experience created by the experiencer from past virtue. And there your physical energy is subtle light, like light. So then your mind is blissful and light and the physical energy is light. And that type of rebirth lasts a very long time, they say. There's a couple of those. Then further down in the less exciting suburbs, but still better than the lower one, is us, the human. The result of virtue, primarily the result of virtue ripening at the time of death. The human birth is a much more suffering one than the God realm, for example. This is an experience. But it's a much better rebirth to have because a God experience is like super blissful. And you're so caught up in bliss, you don't understand that you're still in samsara, meaning you still haven't realised emptiness, you still haven't cut the root of samsara. This is understanding the second kind of suffering in the first noble truth, the suffering of change. So you, even just in the relative level, you find a person in the human realm who lives in the best suburb and is totally beautiful and has gorgeous friends and a beautiful mind and very sweet and very loving and money in the bank. You tell them they're suffering. It's like a cruel joke. You know? Even us, if we compare our suffering with people like living in prison or on the streets, we feel ashamed to say we're suffering. This is the second kind of suffering, the suffering of the mind. The suffering of attachment. Hard to see. Like we've been talking. And I want to talk about that today too. We'll get there. That's high school. Okay, so then you've got the 3 other realms, the worst suburbs, and they get worse as you go along, in samsara, in the desire realm, which are now mainly the result of non-virtue. Either the 3 root delusions, either attachment, ignorance, attachment, and aversion, or anger. The 3 main delusions. And because all of these states, all of these realms are just states of mind. I can't stress this enough. There's states of mind. There's psychological states which come along with a certain level of karmic appearance and physicality. And all created by our own self. So, the next one down is the animals. This is one of the first of the lower realm, which Atisha now wants us to think about, the suffering of these. This is like having this, this is the result of smoking. You've got to look at it and see, oh my God, I don't want that. That's the wake-up call. So this is what he wants us to look at, is the lower realms. Now, already for us as the materialists, assuming God made, oh no, it's okay, lower realms for Christians is not too difficult to think about. But usually only one, called hell. And then many Christians just say, nah, I don't believe in it. So the Buddha, of course, is saying this does exist. And so what he's describing is, okay, first of all, the first realm is the animal. So first of all, even if you're a Christian and you think you can go to hell, the thought that you can become an animal, that doesn't exist. And this is where we see, this is where it's even very hard, because we're so grasping at this form of me as a human. To think that I can be me as a lion seems like a cosmic joke. But again, keep remembering, I'm trying to stress that the Buddha just says all a dog is a mind that's beginningless like yours and mine. It's created causes to have that kind of mind. Then at the time of death, indeed, as a human, the mind left that body, the human is over. The karmic seeds of delusion, of grasping, of harming, or whatever, stupidity, ignorance, whatever, that ripened at the time of that death, program that consciousness, and then due to karma, strong history with that particular new mummy and daddy doggy down in Sydney somewhere, you die, you're in the bardo freaking out, and then you see the new mummy and daddy doggy doing tricks, and you get all excited, it looks divine to you, and you run like a magnet. And your consciousness now, the karmic seeds to be like a dog, and then all the tendencies of dog and the experiences of dog, those karmic seeds ripen. All the ones you've done as humans get subsumed. They're in the mind, but they don't ripen. And now this new package comes along. Boom, now you're a dog. So what Atisha wants us to do is think about the suffering of the lower realm. But the animal one we can see, at least we can see this. And then again, to even think that they're suffering is another discussion. You know, Harry. Shocking to her. What's your name again? Sarah, that's right. You know, generally it's shocking for us to think that her dog Harry suffered. Or it's a lower realm. It feels so hierarchical, it feels so arrogant. We have all these overtones. So it's so important just to hear the way Buddha's talking. It's a contextual thing. If you want a long neck, of course it's best to be a giraffe. Do everything you can to be a giraffe. You'll get the best long neck in the world, I guarantee you. If you want to fly, it is obviously better to be a bird. They can do it easily. If you want to be loyal, like Harry, and loving and wag its tail every day and look like happy every day and be loyal and live around nice humans who feed you and look after you, be a dog. It really is a good rebirth for that. But all the Buddha is saying is you want to develop your mind. You want to get out of samsara. You want to get some wisdom. You want to develop compassion. Best to be a human. Well, not the best by any means. Look at the terrible things we do. The best to get the best of the human birth. And by definition, qualities of wisdom and virtue are human characteristics. We can see that dogs have some of those. We can see that humans have lots of animal tendencies, which is essentially the ones of ignorance, following all the delusions, following attachment, following aggression. All these are not human characteristics. This is why the way the Buddha would say that this time, we're in a degenerate time, when we are like animals. We look like animals, born on a planet looking like animals. We're even called animals in our scientific view. The human part of us is the wisdom and the virtue. And if we're fortunate, we can access some of this. Aren't we fortunate? Because we've worked hard at it. So, to think, so further down, but further down you've got far more occupied. With animals, they include all the trillions of insects and the fishes. There's clearly trillions and trillions and trillions more of them than there are of humans. I remember reading years ago in the New York Times science pages, they were finding, and I'm hearing more about it now too, then billions of new species, not just beings, billions of species in the depths of the ocean, where we always believed there couldn't be living beings since there's no oxygen, based on our definition of a living being. Billions of new species living in the depths of darkness, piled high on top of each other. And this is reiterating Buddha's point. There's not an atom of space you won't find sentient beings. And the Buddhist view in the Lam Rim is this is where the vast majority of all animals live, which is the real depth of despair, dark suffering of the animal realm. The giraffes and the dogs on the surface of the earth are like the ones in heaven. They're like the animal god realm. The real animal birth which is the personification of ignorance, the first of the root delusions. Absolute primordial depth of darkness and ignorance. That's a nightmare. And then even the dog, like I mentioned, Lama Zopa, I remember hearing. Just for a moment to even experience the mind of your own dog, of little Harry. The suffering of it, which is the ignorance, the panic and paranoia of this primordial ignorance, even a lucky dog, would be so unbearable. We'd never spend another moment wasting his life. So that's an interesting concept. That's coming from a person who's supposedly realised. So, it's an interesting experience to have this. So all it's pointing to is the depth of suffering that we don't think about, not in this way. We think of a suffering animal. If Harry gets hurt, then we think Harry's suffering. Because our view of suffering in the First Noble Truth is the same for us, the suffering of suffering. We only think of suffering when we get hurt, when bad things happen. But the second kind of suffering, which is the suffering of the mind, we don't see that at all, even though we're having it every day. And so animals are the same. The obvious suffering is that all the poor domestic animals get abused and harmed brutally just for us to get dinner, This is obvious, and we can see this kind of suffering. But the actual suffering of the mind of an animal is hard for us to see. And this is the one that just takes time to think about. That's the suffering of ignorance, which is, and remember, it's really not gone into very deeply in Buddhist psychology, but it's mentioned, it's just there. That all the delusions, ego grasping, ignorance, giving rise to attachment, anger, all the rest, are in the nature of fear. It's not as if there's a separate delusion called fear. They're all completely an expression of fear is their taste. You analyze when you're afraid. That's evident. That's ego grasping rising strong when you're attacked. Then look at attachment when you don't get what you want. Look at it. You look at a child screaming in panic because they didn't get what they wanted. They're having a mental breakdown right there. Fear. Every one of the delusions is fear. Look at the anxiety and panic we have every day now. Fear. All the delusions. As Lama Zopa says, when you realise emptiness, there is no fear. It's a shocking concept to even think is impossible. There's only bliss and love and compassion and wisdom, is what we're saying the whole time. So the animal has primordial, beyond bearing, utter, beyond bearing fear. Lucky Harry that's got Sarah to take care of him. How precious, fortunate Harry. Look at the nightmare of ordinary dogs, animals. The wild animals, which we love to think are so special. We put cameras up close, we bring the kids in to watch the mummy lion rip the guts out of the buffalo for breakfast, thinking, oh, that's nature, darling, have a look. I mean, excuse me. If you brought them in to see, Sarah, let's say Sarah suddenly decides she's hungry and she wants to eat her baby, which an animal will do when it's really hungry. Oh, come on, look, get the camera up. Come on, wait, hang on, Sarah, don't do it yet. Let's get the camera on there. Oh, this is nature. This is wildlife. Get my point, please. Whew. What? Oh, what? Yeah, go on. Oh, what doing? What's this got to do with what I'm saying here?
Well, it's just the
I'm talking about suffering. But I'm talking about, I hear what you're saying, but the point here is the way we look at animal world, right? And it's, the Buddha would say, anybody with half a brain maybe, I mean, if it was Harry eating my dog for breakfast, then we'd call it suffering because we're both attached to our dogs, and I'll sue you and you'll sue me, we'll have mental breakdowns, But when it's the lion eating the buffaloes for guts for breakfast, oh, that's nature. Buddha just says, please excuse me. Talk about the buffalo suffering. But look at the lion suffering. This is the point here. The suffering of the mind. When she's so addicted, she's just driven by unbelievable craving. And then her tool to get what she wants is aggression. And then killing. Can you even imagine that suffering? I mean, just think of yourself. I just always try to think, oh, well, I'm hungry. I've got kids to feed. So I go outside, and the only thing I can access in my mind is the thought to get the neighbours next door. So I go, I stalk her. I get her by the throat, rip her onto the ground. She's screaming in agony. I call the kids, come on, darling, have breakfast. I think you'd suggest the person's suffering. Well, you see, remember, Buddhist psychology refers to all beings. And I mean, this is not fitting in our materialist view. Absolutely not. But this is Buddha's model. And ignorance and attachment and aggression, etc., is the model of all sentient beings. So we take that as our basis. Then with that in mind, human, animal, same suffering. but trillions times more for the animal, because they can't access virtue. So if a fisherman, if a human being with virtue and goodness, which he did have, cannot see that he's harming the fish, this tells you the depth of ignorance and attachment and karma. Well, the lion, a trillion times more, because the poor lion can never access. Maybe that fisherman could have heard about how fish suffer and might have been able to change, but the lion not possible. So just thinking about this, applying Buddhist view into the animals to see the conclusion here is not even compassion yet. This comes later. It's a wake-up call here. It's like looking at the videos about the cancerous lungs or the hole in the throat. The learning from this, you can have compassion for her, but you just go back to smoke, oh, the poor lady, isn't she? Oh, but I'm lucky, I won't get it. That's foolish. The learning here is, do I want that kind of rebirth? Do I want a mind like that? That's the point. That's the question. So if you can think of the possibility that consciousness can be go from a human mind, human body, to an animal body with an appropriate mind to go with it. If you can imagine how that's possible, then the conclusion has to be, no, I'd rather not be a lion, not to mention the buffalo. Yeah. Oh my God, of course, that's the point. That's what we're talking about. That's the point. Not at the time of death. No, this is the... Precisely. If you haven't practiced driving a car, and then you get to your driving test, you won't be able to drive the car then, will you? Do you see? So it's just a simple analogy. So if you haven't practiced thinking about impermanence, and practiced giving up attachment, and practiced killing, lying, stealing, killing, which is where we're getting to, we're not there yet, then obviously you won't be ready to die with a happy mind and then actually be confident you can get a decent human rebirth. That's all. Yeah. So I say options because it quite literally is true, but not just at the time. You've got to prepare yourself for it because it's a mental thing. That's the point. Exactly. That's right. So the point here then is Atisha wants to think about the suffering of the lower realms. So when you study the Lam Rim, as we know, in a very traditional way, you learn all about the hell realms and the spirit realms. And for me, when I heard all these, I just thought, well, I can't get my head around that kind of experience. Why they talk, one of the courses, Lama Zopa Lama Yeshe started meeting Western students. They came out of Tibet. Rinpoche came out of Nepal via Tibet when he was about 15, and then went to Buxagur, this place in northern India where all the lamas and the monks were refugees, and they left their own country in 59. And then Lama Yeshe ended up there too. He came via Lhasa. He'd been in Sergei Monastery. He was 26, Rinpoche was 16. 10 years different. And they met there, and Lama became Rinpoche's teacher. He looked after him. So they were together, and then in about mid-60s in Darjeeling, I think, Lama Zopa, like a lot of Tibetans, got TB. So they went to Darjeeling to recuperate because the air there was clearer. And they met their first Western student like mid-60s. And then they went to Kathmandu. This is late 60s, early 70s, when it was right in all the raging hippies coming for drugs and liberation. So they meet these Tibetans. Then they began to meet more Western students, and then through this one student, they got this land up on a hill out of Bodhanath, which is this old ancient holy Buddhist place, with a massive big stupa in there for however long God knows. And then they started all these courses for Westerners, like I think the first one was 71 or something, I can't remember. And there were maybe 15 people, and then within this couple of years there were like a couple of hundred people coming, Westerners all over from the West, mostly the West, Europe, America, Australia, New Zealand, coming for these courses, these intensive 1 month Lam Rim courses on these topics we're discussing here, taught by Lama Zopa. We taught them in a very traditional way. And of course, one of the courses, he's famous for spending 3 of the 4 weeks on talking about the hell realms. We haven't got there yet. We've got to the animals. Now the next one down is the spirits, which is already abstract for us. We can hear about ghosts. You can hear about people being possessed. We can kind of vaguely get a feeling, and maybe there's those kinds of beings. And Buddhism has their own very particular way of describing those, which we briefly mentioned. And then down further, the worst suburbs in samsara, the most occupied, all mental states, are called the hell realms, which is so shocking for us in the West. It's fascinating how Dante's Divine Comedy is so popular. I was reading, there was another, Clive James, the Australian writer, he's just done a translation of Dante's Divine Comedy. So many translations, people loved it. It's interesting, people loved it. And it's just Catholic theology, It's fascinating. So we can see it's in most religions, this concept. But of course, in the Christian teachings, it's a place that God created. Has to be, because everything that exists is from God. And it's punishment when you're naughty. So, of course, in the Christian teachings, the creator religion, Islam as well, is the dualistic view of a creator who creates everything, and then the dualistic thing of punishment and reward. Because there's not that dualistic concept in Buddhism, it's hard to get our heads around, because we have that dualistic view instinctively, punishment, reward, good, bad, which is why we want people to praise us, and why we want to hide our bad qualities. We have this dualistic view that assumes I am who I am based on who sees me. This is the dualistic ego way it works. So then to hear the same teaching in Buddhism about realms of existence where you go when you're naughty, it sounds the same. But there's this fundamental difference that they're created by our mind. No one sends us anywhere. This is the thing about karma, which is hard, just conceptually and intellectually, it's hard to first get our head around, to be clear about, to get the words right. Because all the assumptions we pack into it are coming from the dualistic view of punishment and reward. So it's really important to get that. And it just takes time to think about it. It just takes time. As Ramyeshi said, hell is not some place where the devil is waiting, saying, ha-ha, I'm waiting for Ramyeshi. Hell is, as he said, the manifestation of the negative energy of that person. So all these near-death experiences, like of hell or of blissful life, they're all karmically created by our mind. Everything we experience is. It doesn't mean I made up that person over there who comes and punches me. I didn't. They exist. But I've got some history with that person. Hang on, just keep it for a second. Is that a hand? Oh, just scratching your head. I haven't got my glasses on, so I can just see vague movements, So, okay, so the third one down is the hell realms, which is the most vastly occupied. Well, I know when I first read all these descriptions, they sound like sort of like horror films, basically. And I thought, how could I possibly sit and seriously think about that? So for my mind, over the years, I have to say I've never done one meditation on the hell realms, the way they talk about it. But what I like to do and want to do, which is what I try to express, is how can be logically true, that there can be rules. That for me is very, very powerful. How I can find a coherent within this model. Okay, so any questions before we go on about how to think about the suffering of the lower realms and get the learning from it? Yes, darling. Well, okay, no, the better... No, oh my God, darling, that means they don't have Buddha nature, isn't it? You're implying they don't have Buddha nature, they're just animals forever. Is that what you're suggesting? No, I understand, but what is... I understand your question, so let's discuss it. Your question, when you just said after that, are they just keep being animals? Would you suggest that? Did you say that? Okay, so then you're suggesting that they are... So, okay, do you accept the way we've been talking that they're sentient beings? The term that their mind possesses. And have you heard me say, and you know from your own experience, that Buddha says every sentient being has Buddha nature, which means the potential to be a Buddha. Well then, how can they keep... So stop. Then how can they keep being animals if that's the case? Eventually the karma will run out. They don't, if they'll only ever forever and only ever have the potential to be animals, then it isn't true to say they're sentient beings, or it isn't true to say all sentient beings have Buddha nature. And it is true to say that if once you're an animal, you're lost forever, for eternity. That's the Christian teaching. Once you go to hell, you're gone, because it's forever. Buddha would say, every mind, this is why it's important to get this point really clear, the logic of it. Every consciousness, every mind, virtue is fundamental to it and can never be removed from it. non-virtue is not fundamental to it and can be removed. That's why Buddha says then every mind possesses the potential to be fully developed in goodness and rid of badness, which is what a Buddha is. So all beings possess that. Second point. Remember we did the purification. I would say, and then of course as animals we mustn't kill millions of beings. Well, if we have been animals in the past, and here we are human, then that answers your question, doesn't it? You see? And thirdly, there are trillions and trillions more animals than humans, aren't there? So they can't all just be from a recent life a human. There aren't that many. So the next point is all beings have been in these realms countless times. We've been animals countless times. We've been in the hells countless times. We've been spirits countless times. We've been gods countless times. This is how Buddha would say it. So does that answer your question broadly? Right. Yeah. That's right. So what do you mean, is it fair?
Well, I'm at a standstill. I've got 3 dogs. I'm seeing their affection, even when they're happy.
Right. Yeah. Right. So what's your option? What's the option you're implying here?
Well, like, I would rather not have pets. Like, exactly.
So, okay, stop. I understand. So you've got 3 pets.
Yes.
So is it a decision you want to make? Should I get rid of them? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, it's not my decision, it's the family.
Okay, so then what do you mean by fair? What do you mean by that?
Well, in my own train of thought, I'm trying to get my head around now. I've got pets. I prefer not to have pets because I consider.
But surely if you had like say you have a Down syndrome child and you see they're suffering, would you suggest that you should get rid of them because they're suffering? That's a bit cruel, isn't it? If you have a child who's suffering, or you have an old senile grandpa, or you have a poor animal that can't look after itself, surely, given that you have got the karma of that being, you really must want to keep it to help it. That's the answer to your question. What? Okay. Yeah. So then go on. So where are we getting here? Gone where? That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. That's a different scenario. So what your question is, in the future, it's best if I don't get pets because of this and this. And I would say, yep, that's a good idea. But you made it confusing by saying you've got pets now, as if you want to get rid of them because you don't. So, well, that's fine. So then, obviously, what you're thinking is, if you want to go focus, but it's up to how you prioritise. If you want to if you've got a home and children and things, it's nice to have pets, but remember what they are and try to help their minds develop some virtue before they die. Have lucky pet. I mean, Harry's won the lottery getting Sarah. As long as she's just not attached to it and doesn't help it create more negative karma. If you're going to have a pet, do useful things, do help its mind. The Buddhist view, you say mantras, you give it, you really can help it create virtue. What a fortunate pet. And it's part of your practice. But to have attachment to pets and have 47 cats and you think you're being so lucky, you're wasting your life. Better to go off and meditate, or better to go off and have a couple of... it's just, you've got to prioritise. The way people are extremely attached to pets is no benefit to anybody. It's not virtue, it's nature's attachment. You kill all the fleas on them, you're harming so many other creatures just for the, So then get your perspective. So if your perspective is you want to practice more and do this and that, that's reasonable not to have pets. Of course it is. But for the right reason. Which flip side? But everything has consequences, sweetheart. You have a husband, you have a dirty toilet having a husband. You want to chuck him out because you want a dirty toilet, that's fine. Your priority is husband or dirty toilet. Come on. Don't make it too complicated. That's okay.
So I think that I'm practicing patience.
Given that you've got animals, you've got to accept what comes with it, what to do. Any other questions? That's right, Buddha says that. Yeah. We are all suffering. What, darling? Say it again. What are you saying? Keep. Now, her point's reasonable, though, because if you want to practice, it's sort of if you want to go off and travel every... Anyway, think about it. Keep it there. Talk about your discussion group. Any other questions? Did you find out if Dharmakaya is a person? Did you have a dream? The lava is informing you, Al? Oh, very good. Well done. Nothing coming yet. Okay, well, I'll see if I can do some research as well. I'll check with Google God. See what comes up, you know. Any other questions, people? Yes, Jane.
If you're in the body realm, can you then do that something back to a human birth to realize?
Okay. In the God realm, this type of mental experience is immense joy and bliss and happiness because it's the result of a lot of morality and a lot of generosity, a lot of goodness. Not a spiritual practice, just a virtue. Virtue itself brings bliss. So it's immensely blissful. It lasts a long time. Christians call it for eternity. But the Buddha would say it also does end. It's like petrol in the tank, an awful lot of petrol. It will run out. And because you haven't realized emptiness yet, your non-virtuous karmic seed that you haven't purified will just ripen and you'll be back to the lower realm. So it's a bit depressing. That's what I said. You go to the lower realms. Huh? I said the lower realms. No, that's an upper realm. So you might get but in the end it's wasting all that virtue. You waste it up. It's like you've got hundreds of millions of dollars, you forget that it's a resource, you just enjoy it, all the diamonds, you eat them all up, and you end up with nothing. It's tragic. It's heartbreaking. It's best to not have it. But that's what, it's interesting. So they say, okay, let's how they talk. You've got God's couple of those, and then the human. They are the fruit of virtue. To get one of those births is the fruit of virtue. Technically, just leaving it to the process of virtue, much less virtue gets you a human birth. But this is why they articulate this thing called precious human rebirth, which is a human birth, which is not so hunky-dory as a God realm, but you consciously aspire to get a human one where you can meet the teachings and practice because you've got some reasonable amount of intelligence and you're not so blissed out that you can see that you're suffering because you've got some suffering. So it's a better rebirth because you've got more access to your intelligence and to your ability to see that you're still suffering and to therefore have access to teachers and the Buddha and his teachings and that stuff. So you make aspirations and prayers. Prayer is just meaning aspiration. Prayer is like a plan. I want to have a carrot. Well, guess what? I'll sow the carrot seed and I'll get a carrot, guaranteed. I want a decent human birth. I want this and this and this. You can plan it all out by your prayers, by your aspirations every day. May I never be hard from the teachers. May I have it. It's not just crossing your fingers. It's sowing those seeds which will bring that result. So it's far superior to get a human birth. So you can keep practicing. How else would it be if it weren't? What other type of option is there but linear timeline? By definition, time means linear. Past, present, future, isn't it? What else exists besides that? Okay, this is a good discussion. I hear what you're saying. Let's look at what we mean by this. Remember the Buddha saying there's conventional truth and then there's ultimate. So conventional truth means you state a name, you define it, and then it functions that way. So define time. Simple definition of that, how we understand time. Oh, we call it past, present, and future, don't we? Would you say that's the definition of time? That's the definition of time. Would you say that? And we would all agree that past means yesterday, present is now, and future is tomorrow. Would you agree with that? Okay, so then that's time. Cause and effect. Would you agree that a flower is the fruit of a past cause? Necessarily, isn't it? An effect comes after the cause. Would you agree with that? We define it like that. And that's also related to time, isn't it? We know you sow a seed and you've got to wait for the future to get the plant. Would you agree with that? It's just the way you use words. So we define our terms, we accept that definition, so then, relatively speaking, time is that. Easy going, comfortable. So it's called past, present, and future. You see? It's not a cosmic idea, really. I mean, you can talk about I don't want to go there. Don't even go there. Relative reality of time is that. But what's interesting is our experience of time is very interesting. Like I mentioned, remember I mentioned the guy walking down the corridor? That experience of walking down the corridor was as long as walking from here to Alaska. And he probably didn't leave his mind for more than a minute or two. So really it does show, and that is why I think they talk about eons of time in the hell realms. It's maybe the experience of the time, because time is definitely a human construct. Or even when you die, what's your name? Kali. When Kali dies, all of Kali's finished, like we said. The very subtle consciousness of Kali, which carries all the imprints of Kali's past actions, is all that's left. Then it goes into the intermediate state. And then when her new mummy and daddy, let's say her new mummy and daddy are hopping into bed in Africa, well then in a millisecond your mind is there. You don't climb on an aeroplane. There's no sense of space and time to get to what's called Africa. Do you understand? So the experience of time, when the mind is subtle and doesn't have a physical body, has to be different because it's a human construct. But it's still reality conventionally. You see. Sure. That's right. That's right. Well, of course, you will. Yeah, no problem. Just a correct call. Be nice. Don't lie. Don't kill. Don't steal. You just set it up. And even more exciting technology in the future. Yeah. See my dreams as dreams. And what happened? Oh, good sign. But it was always in the dream. Ah. Yes.
You're only dreaming. Because yes, that's what I was.
You heard her.
Yes.
What an excellent night. That's very interesting. I know that I recognise when I was a child, I'd have dreams like that all the time, and I would be able to. I'd always, in my dream, I'd have a red or green high doctor's bed. You know what they call it? You used to have. And then I would, in a dream, if I didn't like it, I'd lie down, count to 10, and wake up. And it worked every time, but often that would happen. I didn't wake up. I woke up. I thought I was woke, but it was in my bed, but I was still dreaming. It was a real drag. I had to go back and count 10 again. Sometimes it was a bit scary. Like that. So that's, well done. That's good. The subtle mind.
My chest was actually hurting.
From the
So
pain.
I think I must have really
Been moaning.
been moaning.
There you go.
It was sheer terror.
That's a good sign. Now they say that when there's terror in a dream, that the ego really is purified. That's excellent. That's excellent. Well done. Congratulations. No, that's okay. That's
And I
okay.
like the second line.
Well done, Jane. You did a good job, both of you. That's amazing. That's great. It's good. That's very good. Well done. That's really great. That's a good dream. My God. Wow. No, that's good. Fear in dreams is good. Yes, Al. I know it's hilarious to say those words, but there you go. That's right, exactly. Yeah, endless. All beings. Yep. It's not a logical conclusion, it's a good question, but don't hold your breath, is what I'd suggest. And the evidence for this is look at the world. If the vast majority of beings are in the lower realms, I mean, it sounds very depressing and hopeless, and that's why they say the only option is bodhicitta. And so what they say, what sustains the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas to never give up, this kind of perky optimism of the bodhisattvas, is the fact that there is the potential. There is the potential. But, yeah. But I think it's, and this is, they say this is what drives the bodhisattvas. First of all, the unbearableness of the suffering of the sentient beings, and because they've got this Buddha nature, then you know there's no choice but to keep on going. And that's why you want to become a Buddha and manifest in millions of forms throughout space. But you don't hold your breath. You've got this immense enthusiasm, which is the joyful effort. I think you can deduce that that's a possibility, but it doesn't, that's a different discussion. It doesn't mean they haven't got the potential.
No, it's not. It's not that if you're thinking the time, then necessarily, my argument,
But is this helpful to you, Al? Is this really helpful thinking? Is it really helpful? How is it helping you? How does it help you generate the wish to help sentient beings? Okay, frame it in that. Tell me how this, I'm really serious, Al. Tell me how this energizes you to have bodhicitta, to never give up on sentient beings. I know, but long term you want to get bodhicitta all the time. So you can never stop working for these mothers. No, that's not the way to think. It's the wrong way to think. The bodhisattvas and Buddhas don't think that. They think that every sentient being has the potential, therefore I must never give up trying to help them. You don't say, well, listen, excuse me, when they all get enlightened, they might not, well, I'm giving up here. That's the wrong point, that they will. And Al, you said logically they all will, and you said some of the Nyingmas say they won't. That discussion to me isn't the issue, because once we establish Buddha nature, then it's not a question of when they will be. It's a question of the emphasis is on I will never give up. That's the thinking, Al. No more. I want you to think about it and meditate on it. May I suggest, and I'll do the same. But that to me is the point. This other one isn't the point. Whether they will or won't is not the point. It just isn't the point, Al. Having Buddha nature is the point. And if we're convinced about that, that's what will energize you to have unbearable compassion forever. That's what all you'll think about. Not, will they get enlightened? That's intellectual. That's just kind of not the point. It isn't the point if we have genuine compassion. So we have to practice wanting to never give up, working for them, because they have Buddha nature. Do you see? But then you think of the other one if you like. But I would suggest this is the better way to go. I'm telling you, Martha tends to be quiet. So it's intellectual nonsense. Yeah, and yes, and yes. There are 46 secondary ones and 18 primary ones, or is it 14? We won't go into them, but we'll discuss in general what they are and the approach to them. I'll do that. When we get to the Bodhisattva. We're still in grade 3 of junior school. Go on, yeah. Yes, sweetheart. Go on. Yes. That's right. Yes. That's right. That's all. That's all it means. That's all it means karmically, is that creatures have stopped creating the cause to have that type of shape and colour, They're going to find plenty of others, not to worry about it. But at the same time, you can still be sad about it. I remember his Dalai Lama, His Holiness, being sad about the destruction of all the animals and the wild animals and different kinds in Tibet, because it's part of their world, But you see it from the technical point of view. Yeah. That's right. Well, if you think of it this way, but that's a kind of a cruel and arrogant way to think about it, which of course is the way that humans think. We think of the environment as ours, and as long as there's a nice, there's the fact that there's an extra number of rabbits in Australia is most offensive for us humans, so we go and slaughter millions of them. The fact that we've got cane toads where they don't belong, it's sort of okay. Or even the fact that there are sort of this rabbits in a particular environment where you've got these nice wild bears, so we slaughter all the rabbits because we prefer to have them as nice. I mean, we impose our own immensely arrogant. We bring all the creatures and we kill them all. So it's a bit hideous, really, Totally out of whack, and guess who made it out of whack? We did. I mean, Tibet, they say, before the Chinese came, because they didn't generally kill, there was no such thing as imbalance of the environment. There was no such thing. They didn't have a thing called environmentalism because they were naturally environmental. They didn't kill it, so there was a natural balance, that things worked, There were chemicals, there was this, there was that. When the Chinese came with all these delusions and their arrogance, completely ruined everything, Imbalance. What do you mean, John? This is a way to help animals. It's marvellous. Of course it is. No, this is of course the way. This is the way this is the way Lama Zopa would help animals, and the way you can, according to the Buddhist view, putting virtuous imprints into their mind. Absolutely. You've got to have animals, but you don't need to have them to do it. You just go to the fishing shop and you blow on the fish. They won't like you very much, but you just blow mantras on the dead fish in the fish shop, or you go to the, or you go to the supermarkets and you can buy all the, buy the lobsters and save them, things like that. There's things we can do for animals. As many as we can. The ants we meet, the worms we meet. Yes. 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 I understand. Okay. First of all, the way Lama Zopa puts it, and I'll extrapolate, he said, remember I said, even a bone that's 1,000 years old, meaning, and we know that a bone was once the body of a sentient being, wasn't it? Part of the body. So I'm extrapolating here. I'm sort of deducing from it. He says, even a bone that's 1,000 years old, saying mantra, which is these Sanskrit sounds that represent enlightened energy, but verbal, that blesses your breath. And then blowing on a bone, or the fish on your plate, or the live ant, or your grandma for that matter, kind of blesses. Is what they say. And so then, Lama Zopa said, even that bone, the consciousness that did live there, wherever it is now, and I would extrapolate because of the connection between that consciousness and that past body of it, there'll be a benefit to that consciousness. And he says, if you're going to eat meat, at least do something for the animal that was there, the mind. Blow on the fish, blow on the chicken, blow on the steak. And the being who did live there will get something. Well, they say particular ones, but I think any old mantra does. I mean, I don't know. Which ones they teach? I don't know. Al, what have you heard? Who's this one? What's this one? Is it a particular deity, or is it... So there's, especially for animals. Okay, there is one, but I just use say any mantra. You can say any mantra. Wow. Oh, good. Okay. Good. Good. So that's great. I've never bothered to learn it. I'm a bit lazy. I just say any mantra. Any mantra will do. That's great. That's the one. Good. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. And all the... Okay. Fantastic. Good. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Very nice. Well, what he'd also do, when I was based in San Francisco, running the prison project, we bought. Rivershire had this big Ford, kind of like half truck, half car, what do they call them, like a great big, like not an SUV, like a truck with a back on it. The truck, it's sort of like, it was a ute, as we call it once, and now it's got the seats on it. Great big fat Ford thing, big maroon coloured. What he has all these decals. So he has all over it, mandalas, mantras, prayers, because he says every animal that hits it will get some benefit, so it's very reasonable. You can put them on your bike wheels, like this, even the physical will benefit. That's right, there you go. Hang on. So you had a question, sweetheart? To become a Buddha. Yes. the way it is, no, I'd say the analogy for this, and we're going to go back to the Bodhisattva wing, the methods. The analogy would be this, of what bodhicitta is, and which is based on compassion, would be, you see, look outside the world, you see all the people with suffering diseases. Okay, I use this analogy. Okay. I always use this as an analogy for what bodhicitta. See, bodhicitta is this aspiration, like I'm saying to Al, which he's talking about, to never give up wanting to benefit these sentient beings. Never give up because they've got Buddha nature. So this is what energizes you to never give up. This is bodhicitta. It's phenomenal. And it's based on enormous compassion and love. They even talk about love and compassion. They have another layer of it, we're going to go into this, called great love, great compassion, which is this, compassion is, oh my God, look at that suffering. It is unbearable. Great compassion is, what can I do to take it away? And this is the unique characteristic of the compassion of the Bodhisattva wing. It's unique. It's the one that makes, like this universal responsibility, as Thomas used to call it. Okay, all of that is immense. So it's like this. You go to Nepal, and apparently up in the mountains, they've all got cataracts. Lots of them got cataracts. So this is the analogy. So you notice, oh my God, they've got cataracts. You go, oh my God, this is terrible. Look at the suffering. That's compassion. But then you've got this extra one. You either go, oh, that's terrible. I can't do anything about it. I'm not a surgeon, so I'll go away. But you can go to the next one that says, what can I do about it? Now, there's two options there. If you're a surgeon, which means, quote, you've got bodhicitta, you're capable, you're a bodhisattva, you're capable, then you'll help take their cataracts out. But let's say you're not a surgeon, and the only option is you, let's say. Then you can't say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. You think, I must become a surgeon, don't you? That's what bodhicitta is. I must become a Buddha. It's coming off the back of great compassion. What can I do? I can't do much. I'm not qualified right now. So I must become a Buddha. That thought is what bodhicitta is, and that propels you every day. So what does this mean? You've got to come home to Melbourne, go to uni, and you join the club, join the course to become a surgeon. It might take you 7 years. Now, this is what it means also now. We're going to more about this later. Living your life with bodhicitta, what it means is when you wake up in the morning, you remember the suffering sentient beings, which is hard for us because we often don't. You remember the people with their cataracts up in the mountain. Oh my God, they're relying on me. I must become a surgeon. So that calls you to leap out of bed and to go to school and do your studies. Now you've got to do your studies for 7 years. And every day you remember why you're doing those studies. If you start forgetting, then you'll lose the plot, won't you? But you have to never forget. All these people are waiting for me. They're waiting for me to become a surgeon so I can take their cataracts out. This is the application of bodhicitta every day. And then you keep increasing and you never give up every minute, even when you have your meal. Why am I eating? So I can be healthy to go to class, to become a surgeon, so I can help the poor with their cataracts. Why am I sleeping? So I can wake up and healthy, so I can go to class. That's what it means, bringing bodhicitta into your daily life. Bodhicitta means I must become a surgeon. I must become a Buddha. And of course it grows every day, and you get more courageous and more courageous and more courageous. So, okay, to answer your question though, sorry, let's go in a minute. We finished your question. So, our continual growing of that compassion, growing of that determination to never give up, it keeps getting stronger and stronger, and I get more, by going to school, I'm getting more knowledge of how to be a surgeon. I'm motivated by the wish to be a surgeon, that's bodhicitta, but the wisdom, the work on my own mind is the actual work of becoming a Buddha. Are you seeing my point here? So, I'm developing more and more compassion, more and more love. But it doesn't mean that necessarily someone else will get more compassion and love, but I'll be able to help them. And then through this way, I'll give them the methods that they're ready for, as and when. And that to help them on their journey, but also to alleviate their suffering, and then to guide them skillfully. Even if it's just in one life. And this is where, again, the Bodhisattva path, which we'll go into more, you think in terms of eons, as Holiness says. And so life after life, you're bopping back into daily life as a human. You mightn't need to anymore. You might have realised emptiness. You don't need a human life. But you're back here to help others, and you're working on your journey to become a Buddha. You're doing your studies to become a surgeon. So every single sentient being you meet, they mightn't be ready for the noble teachings of the Buddha. So you give them a cup of tea. That's what they need. But you make a karmic connection with them. And you're connecting, you're hooking every one of them, life after life. And you're going to definitely meet them again in future life, so you can then all take their cataracts out, drag them to enlightenment. So helping them in a multitude of ways according to their needs is what we do as a Bodhisattva. That's wisdom wing. That's wisdom wing. Okay, so what that is, I hear you, it's perfect. That's wisdom wing. Let's put it into where it belongs. That's the wisdom wing, which is high school. You working on your mind. You lessening your delusions, which naturally means you'll be less mean, less jealous, less bad-mouthing, more kind. So you can say the main beneficiary is you. The purpose is to develop your qualities, the wisdom wing. But you can see the indirect beneficiary clearly is others. As soon as you even stop killing and lying. I mean, all the rats and cockroaches will have a party as long as it overputs it, because they'll be able to survive now, because you leave them in peace. So inevitably others benefit. The emphasis for you is to work on your mind. The indirect beneficiary is others. And then the compassion wing, you could say, you're still the beneficiary, but clearly others will be the beneficiaries too. So because things are interdependent, everything you do in yourself, of course it will help others. Yeah. But it doesn't follow. The maniacs are hard to subdue, so they're not going to pay attention to you being kinder. The rats will take advantage of you. What, darling? Yes. So what's the point you bring? What's the point you're saying, Sarah? That's right. That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes. That's right. Yes. Right. 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 Which part, darling? But that's life, isn't it? But this is life, sweetheart. We choose to live in life, and whatever we do, we're going to find that. Don't you think, Sarah? Everywhere you go, some are worse, some are better. But this is suffering sentient beings. I know what you're saying, but is that not what life is? Whatever job you take, whether it's working in McDonald's or working in that level, you're going to have other sentient beings who've got delusions and are going to mess up with my delusions. By working on your mind. By working on your mind. This is the wisdom wing. This is really the serious, serious answer. By working on your mind. Yes, that's the point. If someone else is bullying you, you either tell them to stop bullying you, or you leave, or you work on your mind. I'm being very brutal here. There's only a couple of options. A person who's more advanced will see it as their practice. And then this is the interesting thing, like our friends in prison, they bully. Oh my God, almost as soon as you look like you're kind, you're smashed to pieces. But the point is this, and this is we can't be more than we are. As we progress in our own mind, as we develop less attachment, less anger, less jealousy, we develop more courage, more kindness, more flexibility. We can't be bullied. It would be impossible. So this is what we have to learn that, and that's hard. Because if we're not ready to be not bullied, we've still got misery and unhappiness, we've got to get out of the way of that bully. We've got no choice. Or we find a way of seeing it as practice, which is pretty intense. But we have to see the logic. The more we work on our own mind, the highly advanced beings couldn't possibly be bullied because it is water off a duck's back for them. It's like nothing. So that's the learning from the wisdom wing, which is a pretty intense one. But if we're not ready to learn that, we're not capable, then we really need to do something. If you can change it, do something and say something, or leave it. It's kind of brutal, but they're the options, aren't they? Yeah. Okay, let's continue here, or have a break, one or the other. 11, 12. Okay, why don't we have a half an hour break? Yes. See you back at 10 past 11. Then we'll continue thinking about the suffering of the lower realms before we get to the next point in junior school, which is whom can I turn? We've done about the suffering of the lower realms. Then we'll go to the next point, which is whom can I turn to give me methods so that I don't have to get born like that when I die. And this is where we think about refuge, the meaning of refuge, turning to the doctor, which we've been touching on every time we do the first step in the practice. This is where refuge comes. And then taking vows. So we'll go into this one. And then to finish junior school, from that, we'll talk about it, we then take refuge, and then we begin to take the medicine. And this is where we begin to practice, which is where we abide by the laws of karma, which is how we started with the whole thing. So that really is the culmination of junior school, and all the others, purgatory, rebirth, death, perpetuum and rebirth, death and impermanence, lower realms, refuge, all lead to finally deciding, now I will take the medicine. Because you're priming your mind. Atisha's getting us to prime our minds each step, each step, each step. And now we begin to practice. We abide by the law of karma. And that's the end of Yuma's book. So we'll discuss these with the refuge after break. Oh, we're going to do a session, actually. We'll do a session after break. We'll carry on after tomorrow. How many days have we got left? What day are we today? Oh, okay, fine. Still got time. See you in 30 minutes.